At a time when Black history is being pulled from school curriculums, one organization is on a mission to keep Harlem's history front and center. While We Are Still Here, Inc. is installing 25 historic markers to honor those who have given the community its unique character. It's called the Sign of the Times Harlem Heritage Markers Project. And here to tell us more is the founder and executive director of While We Are Still Here, Karen D. Taylor. So nice to meet you.
Thank you very much for having me, and it's nice to meet you too.
And now, so where did the idea for well, not only for the Markers Project, but also for While We Are Still Here come from?
Well, it began in 2015 when I moved into 555 Edgecombe Avenue. And after a while, I realized that it was this very historic building. I would run into these elderly people. They had this comportment, and I found out that some of them were Cotton Club cuties from back in the day. They had this dancer kind of comportment, this bearing, this comportment about them. And they would say, Paul Robeson lived there, and Joe Louis lived in apartment 8, so-and-so, and Lena Horne would come visit him, and Count Basie lived here, and Billy Strayhorn lived here. And I'm like, wow, that is extraordinary. And when I first moved there, like 30 years prior, I told my husband at the time, I said, I've got to do an oral history. And since I'm a great procrastinator, it took like 25 years to actually do the oral histories. And I'm so happy I did them because we lost a lot of elders during those previous years. And so essentially, While We're Still Here was founded to codify the history of Harlem. We initially started with 409 and 555 Edgecombe Avenue, but people, the community said, look, Harlem has this extraordinary history. You can't just do 2 buildings. So we expanded our mission to include all of Harlem. And so that's where the markers come in, the signs of the times. We will be installing 25 markers throughout Harlem over 2024. And the brainchild of it, I would say that the bringing it to fruition, it had to do with Brent Leggs of the African American Cultural Heritage Action Project of the National Heritage Trust.
Yes.
The board members and myself, While We Are Still Here, we went to this board training in Boston. Brent was there. We stayed the weekend. We went through the workshops. And basically, he says, at the end, what would you like to see in Harlem? And I said, markers. He said, okay. Weeks later, Sandra, I got an email from a foundation saying Brent Legg said that we should help you put your markers up. And so that's what we'll be doing.
And you've started already. Several markers. What, 4?
5 markers, actually.
Okay.
We've unveiled 5 markers.
Yeah.
On August 13th of 2023, what we did, we had a whole bus tour to 4 different sites. We called that particular event Lift Every Black Voice of Fire, and we honored Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Larry Neal, and J. Rosamond Johnson. And, the audience probably knows Marcus Garvey. He's this extraordinary historic leader who found the Universal Negro Improvement Association that he, in Harlem, he founded it and he brought it to Harlem, and over the years he had garnered millions of members in the UNIA. And we went from the Marcus Garvey site to the Malcolm X funeral site, and that's where Ossie Davis actually called him our black shining prince in that beautiful eulogy he did. And then we went to J. Rosamond Johnson's place, and his most famous composition is Lift Every Voice and Sing. And he was really, during his time, he was really a very famous musician and composer, during the turn of the 20th century. And he was very clear about the fact that the music of the enslaved, the spirituals and the blues, would become American music.
Yes.
And that's
what happened.
That's what happened, exactly.
And explain, if you will, why it is so important to you to have these markers around Harlem, why is it important for people to know who was here?
Because history is important, history matters, and Harlem was this very influential incubator around the world, around the African diaspora, in terms of politics, in terms of culture, in terms of art. It was extremely influential. Of course, we know the Harlem Renaissance, but there were things that occurred beyond the Renaissance.
Yeah, many things.
Many things that occurred beyond the Renaissance, and we'd really like to, shed some light on those kinds of things.
How do you choose who you will honor, who gets a marker?
Okay, we actually had a professionally facilitated public workshop at the George Bruce Library on 125th Street, and people came. And, we went through this whole process, write down who you'd like to see. We probably had like 50 or 60 people on a list, and we had to whittle that down to 25 people. But an initial list that while we are still here came from Dr. William Sorrell. He's a Harlem resident, has lived in Harlem since like 1970. He's Professor Emeritus from Lehman College, African American Studies. He sent me a list that had probably around 150 people who had lived in Harlem at some time or another. All kinds of people, white people, black people, Japanese people, Chinese people. And so since we're kind of more focused on African American history, black history, we're kind of, bringing those into the forefront.
And so at this point, we've already got 5 markers up, so we can expect 20 more, most of those in 2024, correct?
Yes. But let me say, we unveiled the markers.
Unveil the markers.
Yes, they haven't been installed yet, it has to do with the permits in New York City. And so basically by probably March or April, the first 5 will go up.
Should be in place.
Yes.
Okay. What does it feel like to know that those markers are going up, and to know that you are really informing and educating a lot of people about, who walked the same streets as they did, who stood on the same corner, who lived in the same building?
It's, you see how I'm getting kind of apoplectic right now? I will be so happy to be able to contribute to the understanding of black people's contributions to New York City and the nation and the world. I'll just be extremely satisfied that that's happened.
And I send folks to harlemnyc.org to find out more about this project. It's this historic marker project, Signs of the Times, Harlem Heritage Markers. Karen D. Taylor, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me.
What a great initiative.
Thank you.
Sorely needed. We'll be right back.